Okay, we're recording now, so it looks like the week two discussion is going to be what qualities make a good leader and what qualities make for a poor leader. So, if you all don't mind, I'll start and I'll give my opinion on that. I think that for me, in terms of a good leader, in what I've experienced as far as leaders go, one thing that makes a good leader is what we call at my job having, they call it a servant's heart, basically, which means that you can be a mentor to people, you have patience with people, you're able to lead by example, you're able to educate others on things, and you're able to really care about the people that you're leading and their success. So, in my opinion, that's kind of one of my most important qualities that I look for in a leader, and that I try to be when I'm leading others.
Awesome, thanks, Kenneth. I guess I'll go next with what my good leadership qualities were. So similar to what you were just saying, I kind of agree with that it's the ability to work well with others and communicate and lead by example. So, in order to really be a good leader of others, you need to be able to, connect with them on their level and really get down and understand what they're, going through themselves, and be able to adapt your leadership style to individuals. So I think one of the most important parts is that ability to adapt to change and implement that within your team. And in doing so, you're leading by example.
I'll go ahead and go next. I agree on both of those so far. I would say good leadership also needs transparency. So you need to be able to kind of adjust to situations and adjust to different people. Even if your opinions may be different than certain followers or certain people around you. A good leader is someone that can actually be transparent and be able to not be too opinionated, have their own opinions, but be able to hear other people's opinions and use those in ways that's actually going to create productivity or become more effective in the long run.
Nice. This is Noah, by the way. So I guess just kind of going off of what everybody else mentioned, you guys mentioned transparency. I also believe that it is important to have like a good leader-follower relationship. In terms of, my past experiences when I speak to my leader, and something doesn't go according to plan, or if our project falls through. The leader, he protects his followers and, mostly takes the blame for himself, which ensures trust. And I think that, like you guys mentioned, I think that it's very important to always, have that transparency so that you can trust them. And
Awesome. So who else? We have one more, I think.
That would be me.
Okay, cool.
All right. So, as far as my past experiences and my current position I have now, I think one of the more important, qualities would be not only like a confidence, but being able to develop trust within your team members in your group. As far as confidence, not to the point where you should be overconfident, like you know it all and everything you say is gold, but to the point that they trust enough that when you say something that you know what you're talking about.
So it sounds like a lot
because if you're
Go ahead, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, because if you're unsure about it, they're never going to follow you the way that you want them to.
What I was going to say is that a lot of us seem to mention trust and trustworthiness, which I think is extremely important, obviously, but also kind of leads me into a little bit into the next point, which we're also supposed to discuss what makes a poor leader. So I'll kind of segue into that and say that in my experience, one thing that I think really can affect you negatively as a leader is not having leadership courage. And in general, that entails everything from, basically doing the things no one wants to do. You have to be able to tell people when they're not doing a good job. You have to be able to coach people when necessary. You have to be able to make the hard decisions and say the things no one wants to say. That's in the best interest of both the business and your employees. So one of the things that I've seen that have caused a lot of leaders to fail is not having that courage to do the things that people don't want to do. And that could be anything from just coaching someone, training someone, to not do certain things they're doing that might be bad for the business or bad for just themselves, their brand, their, reputation, whatever that is. Certain people don't have that ability to do that. They don't have that leadership courage, and that, in my experience, has caused a lot of problems with leaders, being unsuccessful because they just don't have it in them to do what's necessary in terms of coaching others, or even all the way up to if you have to fire someone. Some people just don't have that in them, and I think that's one of the things that I've witnessed that's caused failure in over anything else.
All right, to follow off of that, Kenneth, I kind of had somewhat of the same thing. So just, not being sure of yourself as a leader and being inconsistent. So, in my past experience under leaders, one leader that I was under, he was very inconsistent in his approach. So one day he was, fully focused on something and holding people accountable to it. And then the next day he wasn't. So it gave kind of some false impressions about what expectations were for us. So it made it kind of a confusing work environment. What you're saying, it also made it really hard for him to finally make any decisions when it came to holding people accountable and actually firing people, because there was so much inconsistency in how he was holding people accountable that it kind of became a thing where it wasn't really fair to hold somebody accountable when he wasn't doing it to somebody else. Another thing that I experienced under that particular leader was just a lot of false starts with things. Like when he was had some good intentions and putting some new initiatives out, when he would do them, he would kind of not follow through on them. So he'd put something out and be really focused on it, and then once again would just kind of drop off on it. So while we made progress in certain areas, it never really was a consistent thing. It was kind of just this never-ending cycle of going back and forth. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing for me, just consistency and then having a very clear approach.
Awesome.
I'll go ahead and go. So I agree with both of those so far. I would say definitely from my experience, a poor leader has been someone, I've had a leader before that was, I guess, kind of closed-minded, my way or the highway, kind of overbearing, to the point where she would hear other people's suggestions, but then go back to her original decision always, or just kind of want to make sure things were always her way, or she just kind of micromanaged the way everyone was doing something. Even if she delegated work to let people be creative on their own, she kind of micromanage that process. I think a good leader should micromanage to an extent, but a bad leader kind of just takes too much control and doesn't really allow any creativity or any other ideas. And they just kind of overstep, and they just don't give people the potential or the chance to grow within themselves.
Nice. I'll go ahead and go. Just trying to discuss things that weren't discussed previously. So in Arizona, we are in a right to work state. So basically, more or less, just kind of, employers can fire individuals, for whatever reason. So that being said, it's kind of difficult to work, in certain places because, like you all mentioned previously, my way or the highway. So here in Arizona, I really appreciate, certain leaders. Like if, for instance, I'm not doing something correctly, they take me aside and say, hey, this is how you correct your work, or this is how you correct, the way you speak to others, and just kind of guide me, as opposed to just, reprimanding me here. This is a write-up, I think that a good leader, you know, like you guys mentioned, it's always built on trust. Without trust, there's no, basically no relationship. And if you don't have a relationship, you don't really have a leader follower. You know, in terms of that, you're just going, you know, to a place to work as individuals, and you guys aren't pulling as a team.
So I pretty much have the same opinions that you guys do. I'll try to go into as far as few managers and leaders that haven't had the best communication skills, and to me that's a quality that needs to be definitely is an important quality to have, and those that have poor communication skills tend to have a harder time leading. I've had a few managers that come up with like really great ideas, really great plans on paper, but they don't have that communication skill, I guess, to be able to instill the motivation and the ability for the progress that needs to happen. So I think it's just hard leader to be effective if they don't have those skills, if that made any sense.
No, it
that
did.
Makes sense. Mine probably didn't make sense.
No, it made sense, and I think those are all really great points. And I think that communication is certainly really important, as well as, like was mentioned earlier when we talked about good leaders. One good thing also that I didn't mention that was brought up that was being able to adapt to different people's, you know, how they learn, how they respond to criticism, things of that nature. So I think we brought up really good points about both being a good leader and a bad leader. I'm sure we've all experienced both. Maybe we've all been both at one point or another, but the points were great, and that should wrap up the week 1 discussion. That puts us at 12 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll move on to week 2. So give me just 1 second. Or week 3, rather. 1 second.